Hi everyone, welcome back to Demand Decoded. Dan here with Phil. Nice to sit down after a few weeks not in the studio, which is, it's always nice to get back in. On today's episode, we are covering what to include in your marketing dashboard. And I feel like this has always been an issue for marketers, but with AI coming along and really like raising the stakes and the importance of marketing, the importance of understanding what's working, understanding what we actually need to measure in order to keep an eye on things, make sure we understand where things are moving and where we need to jump in and like what we actually need to analyze, understanding what's in your marketing dashboard and who needs to see what information and when is just so important. And it is just what, like, we do talk about measurement a lot because it is still a just fundamental issue across entire marketing teams. So yeah, that's what we're gonna cover off today.
Yep, good to be back. It is an interesting topic. It's not a new topic, but it's changing and evolving because there are changes affecting us every day. What I think is key is the fact that, marketers for a long time have had challenges getting buy-in, getting support, getting trust from senior management, getting the budget they want, getting permission to use the budget the way they want. And largely it's been, at least a factor is the disservice they've done themselves in terms of what they've presented and reported back on. There's a lot of useful data within marketing, but the data that you need different audiences to see differs, and marketers have not always been good at identifying that difference. We've seen that over and over again, and we've fortunately helped some change that, but it's a pervasive issue that I think everybody would benefit from getting clear on if they want to be given the support and trust internally that they need in order to do their job. Like you said, marketing is very, very data-driven as a discipline. You need good instincts, but you need data to support your message and to get the trust that you need from others.
Yeah. Like you've really hit the nail on the head there. Like marketing has become, in some situations, perceived as a cost center because they've presented themselves as a cost center in their data. They have only shown the cost that they're spending and not really shown what they're getting back from that cost. Well, there you go. You are a cost center.
The metrics that you report back don't carry value, so you're only talking about what the expense was associated to them. Yeah. It does start to paint you in a very cost center type picture. Yeah, good.
All right, cool. Well, let's help marketers out and really say what needs to be on this dashboard.
Yeah.
Okay, so Phil, I really like your onion analogy, which you've used in a few different examples. Maybe you really like onions, I don't know, but I like the analogy anyway, which is almost, putting something at the center and peeling back the layers to potentially the less important or less crucial things.
Yeah.
So we kind of chatted before this and agreed on our onion model, right? So when it comes to marketing measurements and the data you have available to you, at the very core of every business is the commercial metrics, the executive level metrics that everybody understands, everybody can appreciate, and everybody needs to know ultimately. So the crucial things that should be there: closed won revenue, marketing ROI, customer acquisition costs, LTV to some extent, those kind of core things that are directly tied to business critical outcomes.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Well, many things in life are onion-like. The analogy doesn't apply solely here at all. There's layers, right? And when you scrutinize something, you often realize that you can peel back a layer and get to something even more valuable beneath or even more important. And that's true in marketing measurement too. Something that has been discussed for a long, long time, although it does still happen very frequently, is that marketers don't peel back the layers when it comes to presenting to the management, to the people, the budget holders, and they don't talk in terms of business outcomes. They don't identify and show how the effect of their work is contributing to things that are either measured in terms of financials or very, very correlatable to those financials. And so, like you say, a good there's a management level marketing dashboard, does not really focus on the cost of a channel to that business, or where budget's being spent, or what the, KPIs around optimizing for a platform, or performance of a component are at all. They don't talk about that. They talk about things that make sense when we talk about business valuations, revenue, pipeline forecasts, and those sorts of things. So to your point, closed won revenue is probably the number one thing to get clear on. You said something fantastic on LinkedIn the other week, which was, marketers are expected to measure ROI without any visibility into the R,
Yeah.
and that's crazy, right?
Yeah.
And this is where that starts, by talking about how much pipeline that the business won, that you're able to demonstrate a role in the creation of, is the key to it. And then you can layer around that additional useful data, such as what is our cost per customer, what is our return on marketing investment, what are the average, if we take into account some fixed variables, lifetime value of customers, or the likely sort of churn rates, or whatever you want to do. Some of those things are not all perfect measurements of past performance, but if you fix some of the variables, they become useful storytelling around business impact of marketing's investments, and move you from that cost center perspective to this value creation, profit center perspective, which is where you start to win trust and support.
Yeah. And I do think there is, maybe this is peeling back a layer here, where you've got your core closed won revenue figure there, but there will always be questions around, like, where was that sourced? How can we attribute that back to an investment ultimately? And I hear some people saying, oh, well, we can't do that. We just need, one figure all to rally around something. But I don't think many businesses jive with that, because when you're investing in sales outbound motion, event marketing, like performance marketing, LinkedIn ads, brand campaigns, you need to be able to attribute that investment to something. So even if it's not at a channel level, but it's at a kind of like signal and source level. So for example, from your closed won revenue pipeline, was that source a high intent lead on the website?
Yeah.
Was it outbound? Where did that person actually originate from into the database ultimately?
Yes.
Was it an import from an event?
Yes.
Like,
I think it's unhealthy for organizations to sort of argue the toss over each and every deal.
Yes.
From a attribution, from a credit point of view. That's not healthy. That doesn't create the right outcomes or behaviors. But when you're analyzing the data, I think you can draw some lines that say this segment of our pipeline was originated through the efforts of marketing and the budget that we spent, not the team, not the people, but the budget that was allocated to marketing. And this portion of pipeline was originated through our sales effort, and like, there's always going to be some gray area, right? There's always going to be some crossover, but it's about saying we put this amount of money in, we get a result that we understand and we value, and that's true in sales and in marketing. Of course, we still need sales to close every marketing deal that's originated, but far better to measure marketing in terms of how much it puts into the sales team that they can have a chance of closing, than to fuel the fire of the fight between the two, and make it, incentivize marketing to do the wrong things so that sales get recognition for everything.
Yeah.
If you see my point?
There's nothing worse on a dashboard than having marketing sourced and then sales sourced next to it, because it just creates competition where neither really wants to support the other, when in reality, like you say, every single deal that comes in needs sales to close it. Every single opportunity that comes through sales will have touched marketing at some point. Like, whether it's the deck that you shared with them that marketing created, but they will go to your website most likely at some point. Like, they will touch like each team in like every single scenario.
Yeah.
This podcast is brought to you by Blend. We're a B2B website and demand generation agency. We work with ambitious businesses just like yours to create and execute effective demand generation strategies that drive pipeline for your business. We also recognize that your website is the most important asset you have in marketing. So we specialize in building scalable websites on HubSpot that convert the demand that you've created. If you want to find out more about our services and see real results that we've generated for businesses, visit blendb2b.com. I've spoken to a few marketers recently and customers of ours, and they've asked similar questions around our board want to know if we put this amount in, what will we get out of it ultimately? That is what, the board cares about. The people injecting money into the business care about ultimately. If we put X in, what do we get out of it? And you need to be able to demonstrate that in some way. That is really, for me, the most important metric in marketing. You've got a budget to spend. How effectively are you deploying that budget to get a return?
Yeah. And in fact, this sort of approach to reporting and measurement and your dashboards is a two-way street, because it's not only what business leaders need to hear and see, it also requires you to gain visibility and understand it, right? A marketing team's job is to make good sound investments of its marketing budget. And if you're looking at the wrong set of data, reporting the wrong set of data, you're not in a position to make good sound investments. You may create metrics, KPIs that go up. You may have high impressions, high engagement, high clicks, high leads. But if that's never measured through to business impact, how can you say that's a good investment of that budget?
Yeah.
So this drives positive change in both directions. And marketers need to be the first to make that change, actually, if they want to change the opinion of the function, if they want to change the representation they have at the top table. They have to start by measuring and assessing themselves in terms of these business KPIs.
Yeah, for sure. Aligning a few of these things together is really important, though, it's worth saying, because customer acquisition cost, for example, is a funny one. We were chatting before, and customer acquisition cost is essentially just total cost of marketing divided by number of new customers. And that's a count of customers. Whether that customer is worth 10 million or 10,000 doesn't matter. It is just the cost of acquiring however many customers you've got. And obviously, we always try to improve marketing metrics. So customer acquisition cost, we'd always want to try and bring that back down. But in reality, it might not actually matter if customer acquisition cost is going up for you to acquire certain accounts, like certain customers that you need to acquire in order to grow. So that's where pairing customer acquisition cost with marketing ROI, for example, is super, super important.
Yeah, because essentially what you're factoring in there is the average deal size that you're creating, which if it's going up, you can accept a higher customer acquisition cost. So yeah, it is necessary to look at these things side by side, and also over a variety of time periods, right? Because nothing in B2B marketing happens, starts in the morning, ends in the afternoon, is reported on in the evening, right? Unfortunately, we operate in sales cycles that are days, weeks, months, years sometimes, and a lot of these measurements are in the month. So tracking the trend month over month, but also quarter over quarter, and in some cases year over year, is really important to get the full picture. Like I say, they might go up. They certainly will go up with, specific investments that you might make. Your new website, for example, your attendance at a key event. These things will likely mean that you spend more in a certain month, meaning your customer acquisition cost during that month will go up, but your ROI will be affected later on.
Yeah.
So really important to take a big view, a broader picture, and see them side by side.
And, different timelines of customer acquisition cost. Because if you look month on month, it might look like a shark's mouth, with customer acquisition cost aligning with big expenses, for example. If you look over a longer time horizon, you might actually see CAC start to reduce slowly.
Yeah, and I mean, there's probably some sophisticated ways to report on that, even while it's going up and down as well. But usually, if you look at this over the length of your sales cycle, then you start to get a really good impression of whether you're trending in the right direction or trending in the wrong direction.
And to be honest, I would try not to overcomplicate it, because as soon as you start overcomplicating something, you've then got some serious explanation and reasoning to add with everything that you present. It loses interest from people. You just need it easy to understand. No measurement in marketing, probably apart from close one revenue, is perfect.
Well, yeah, I mean, and even that, again, during what time frame, based on what investment. So you're 100% right. There is no measurement in marketing that's 100% reliable, trustworthy every day, no matter what. You have to apply your intelligence to it as well. But these are some good ways to make meaningful data available to your team and your business leaders.
Yeah, cool. All right, so that's the core, I think, of the marketing dashboard. They are the measurements that need to be on there and should be presented to the executive level. That's what they'll all want to know.
Yeah. And then you can step back from there and say, well, you're now sort of thinking about the marketing function specifically. You're no longer looking at the sort of net result of marketing and sales working together on opportunities. So there's a next layer of data which is reflective of, as a function with a budget to spend, what are we looking to optimize around? What are our major KPIs for our own efforts, right? Is that where you'd put the attention next?
Yeah. So I've got it kind of down as the leading indicators and revenue drivers. Like, what are the things that we can generate predictably that correlate heavily with revenue?
Yeah, and what are the levers that, if we pull them, will mean positive results on those business dashboards?
Yeah, so I've got things in here like pipeline generated. Some would argue that goes in layer one. For me, layer one is really the truth, like, the bread and butter that can't be argued.
Yeah, I think businesses may differ on that, right?
Yeah.
But it's a valuable metric.
It's a leading indicator of revenue, though. That's the difference for me. It's an indicator. It's not the cornerstone definitive data point.
Yeah.
So pipeline, high intent leads, sales velocity you could throw in there, and then you can break things down like pipeline and high intent leads by self-reported attribution. You've then got conversion rates, lead or high intent lead to opportunity conversion rate, for example. These are all things that if you measure side by side, if you correlate them with revenue, as you increase one, revenue should also go up ultimately.
Yep.
And if not, then you can identify the problem from there.
Yeah, exactly. There aren't so many of them, right? It's interesting. Ultimately, when you analyze everything marketing's trying to do, it boils down to some pretty fundamental stuff. And I think high intent leads through our variety of channels is probably the number one thing that marketing teams need to, think about how they optimize their creations for their assets for. The result being pipeline. Again, the conversion rate from high intent lead to pipeline might fall under marketing or sales, depending on how an organization works, but it's two really important metrics. Sales velocity, that's a bit of a challenging one. I might suggest people replace that with time to close or average time to close, or at least have that data available to them. There are people out there that would point out very quickly that sales velocity is a predictor, not a measure of past performance. But your conversion rates from different sources into those things, that's key data, right? I mean, again, we've spoken about marketers not only need to understand business metrics, business impact, but usually that's just simply a gateway to seeing the stark differences that exist from tactic to tactic, channel to channel, in terms of what really creates high intent inquiries, pipeline opportunities, and closed won revenue.
Yeah, exactly that. And this is really where I love talking to customers and really putting this dashboard together. When you start to show them, what pipeline are we generating from which self-reported attributed sources, where are our high intent leads coming from in terms self-reported attribution, we probably haven't spoken about.
I was just about to say, did you put that on the list? Because I think it needs to be there.
Well, yeah, I mean, I put it in kind of underneath things, because you'd have the core metric like pipeline, like high intent leads, and then break it down by self-reported attribution. But I still just love it. I still can't believe businesses just don't have this. I still speak to so many marketers that are just what self-reported attribution is. Mental.
Have you seen any change in the nature of the self-reported attribution responses we get? 'Cause it's not so fresh a concept anymore, and I've heard some discussions around businesses starting to think about how they capture it and what they put on their forms. Have you seen anything change, or are people still giving us phenomenal insight?
It does depend on industry. It does. I'm in a lot of HubSpot portals for our clients, and I see a lot of data around this, and it really does vary industry on industry. Manufacturers, for example, will get online.
Okay, one word.
Quite a lot.
Not very helpful.
Online search. Sometimes just nothing, or like web. Things that you can actually struggle to then attribute back to a channel itself.
Yeah.
If somebody says online, wow, online is really anything now. Was it on social? Did you Google me? Like
AI.
Was it AI? It could be a whole host of things. When you get into our industry, for example, where you're selling to marketers, they're a lot more willing to give you a lot more information. Our answers are still fantastic. Insight for self-reported attribution, like absolutely fantastic. Most people will tell you, if they came from Google search, they'll tell you what they searched.
Yeah, amazing.
It is that great. But yeah, it does vary based on industry quite a lot.
But no reason not to have it, right? Still, there's no reason to not capture
because you wouldn't have that data otherwise.
Yeah.
And occasionally, you will get more in-depth answers. I'm kind of generalizing industries there because it does vary, and that's what I've seen. But it's absolutely still worth having.
Yeah. And I mean, again, self-reported attribution has its proponents and its opponents. It's never going to be 100% crystal clear reliable, but it's better insight than you can get from a lot of other sources, and better insight than a lot of statistical data ever will be.
Yeah.
So we would never never reject it.
Every time that I've recommended it, that we've built it into reporting dashboards, the response has been like overwhelmingly positive, that they can finally see some data that tells them a bit more than organic search or direct traffic. This is truly telling them more about their overall marketing investments and which ones are having an impact ultimately on these leading indicators of revenue.
Love that. Yeah. We're going to talk next about the next layer, which I think, correct me if I'm wrong, is going to be more in the channels, in the data points, where AI is going to be a topic. Is AI a topic here?
I don't think so necessarily, because it's a channel ultimately.
Yeah.
Self-reported attribution, as we're seeing already, as a lot of customers are seeing,
shows you where AI is
showing you. We're hearing about you from ChatGPT, from Gemini, from Perplexity. They're still just using other forms of navigational search to find your website. I don't think it fits in here, though. I think when you're starting to look at, we'll get into it, right? Share of voice and how you're being cited in AIs. For me, that's channel performance.
Yeah.
But you want to understand via self-reported attribution how you're generating high intent leads through those channels.
Yeah. Actually, a thought comes to mind, which is that, as a marketer, you always want to be prepared with this data, because although, AI as a channel doesn't belong here per se or necessarily, and therefore probably doesn't belong on that management level dashboard, you're going to get questions about it.
Yeah.
So you need to be ready to refer to information and data that shows you've got a grip on it and you've got a handle on it, without it becoming a top line measurement or report.
I feel like it was one thing you said to me before, actually, which is maybe somebody you worked with back in your Sony days, but they always had the answer to data. Like whenever there was a question, and I think that's such a skill for marketers to just either have the data, immediately know it, or know where to find it, because it does paint a bit of a bad picture if the question is asked and you don't know the answer to it.
Yeah, I've met a few people like that over the years, and I admire them greatly. So yeah, like you say, these layers of reporting are not only required, but they're beneficial, because they mean that you can respond to questions when they go beyond what's being discussed. And given the height of the discussion on the topic of AI, you're bound to get asked about it, right?
Yeah, well, should we just go into that straight away? Well, let's just outline the channel metrics first, because we've got, let's just, recap.
Loads, right?
Layer 1 was our commercial metrics, executive level, the metrics directly tied to business outcomes.
Yeah.
Layer 2, we've got the leading indicators, which basically forecast the future commercial outcomes, but they're very relevant to like strategic planning as a business. Then you've got your channel level metrics. So these are like the tactical performance indicators, which would be used to optimize those individual channels.
Yeah.
So yeah, like you say, I think AI is a channel. LinkedIn is a channel. YouTube is a channel. Search is still a channel.
Yeah. Events is a channel.
Events is a channel. All of these things require their own individual analysis.
Yeah.
They're layer 3 though, because they aren't as easy to correlate with those direct business outcomes. You can't quite easily correlate LinkedIn ad impressions with revenue.
No.
The two things don't correlate. So as that correlation starts to disappear and grow greater, you peel another layer off.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and within each of those channels, there's, potentially up a dozen metrics that are important to your team, important to you in terms of how you create and distribute content to those places, how you measure them, what impact you're looking for. So this is where we start to get into really granular data that's valuable and useful, but it doesn't bubble up to the top because it just creates the wrong message, right? It's focused on how you make the investment in that channel work hardest for you, not what impact you're creating necessarily.
Yeah. One interesting thing, well, we should get onto the AI point actually.
Yeah,
should we cover
it's
that
the
off
new
first?
one.
So what to measure in terms of AI analysis right now, AI visibility, basically visibility within large language models. People ask question, people see your brand. That's what people want to know. That's what people want to see. Is that worth including in a marketing dashboard now, and how to get that data is the question, I suppose.
Well, I think this is a rapidly evolving area where solutions are new, and it will take some time to shake out what the real, reliable methods of doing it are. But if you think about it, AI is a place people can go to ask questions, and that generates some data. Now, as far as I'm aware, at the time of recording this, these systems, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, I don't believe they're providing like a hose pipe of analytical data to vendors. But there is a growing category of solutions around AI analytics, which I think are essentially using information that you provide to query a large language model and get a sense of which brands are present in this response. And I think there's a few ways to be present, to be mentioned, to be cited, to be linked to, for example. And, it's probably time for businesses that, for which SEO was an important channel.
Yeah.
It's probably time for these businesses to start thinking about how they can use these tools to understand their place in AI. There might be rapid change down the road. Be ready to change your approach, change your tool, change your metrics, because it's an evolving area, but it's encouraging to start seeing some platforms come through that will give you a benchmark, a data point that you can track over time.
Yeah, and that's what we're looking into right now, right? Like, we want to understand how the channels vary between organic search and our visibility there compared to our visibility in AI and large language models. And it is going to become a key driver for marketers going forwards. And I think everyone should, be thinking about this at least,
Definitely.
but be looking into the tools available that are out there.
I mean, it's made clear for us, right? Because we've started to see self-reported attribution results come back saying, found you in ChatGPT, found you via AI. And because increasingly Google searches are being preceded, particularly when people are researching and using informational queries, being preceded with AI overviews. AI mode is coming. That may get in front of a lot more informational searches and, frankly, commercial searches as well. How buyers interact with those tools and engage with them remains to be seen. What I think is really interesting in terms of AI sort of analytics and understanding is, there was a stat about Google searches, which is a huge proportion of them on any given day had never been seen before. A massive number. It was only the minority of searches that were repeated, even though they aggregate that data up to the keyword level. I can only imagine that's like way higher in AI because the conversations are so much more natural and the query is so much longer and more in detail, and also concatenated. So the data that we get back about these is going to be really interesting, because imagine this, right? An AI analytics platform takes a keyword that you want to be found for, puts it into ChatGPT and gets a response. How often are we as users going to follow that pattern?
No.
Never. It's going to be a approximation as opposed to a rock solid definitive data point. Interesting things to think about.
And it's a conversational experience where, no, you will not have individual keywords and individual phrases. It's a conversation. The most interesting part for me is like how this all changes based on memory. Like if you enable ChatGPT's memory function, then you'll get wildly different responses between people for the same queries based on its memory of you and your search history and its conversations with you in the past. So it will be like we don't really have a tool to recommend like for
Not yet.
a kind of like fail-safe way to measure all of this. I don't think anybody does.
No,
like it's really experimental right now. There's lots out there that are using the same techniques. Like you say, they are basically querying AI models to then understand how many times you're referenced. A lot of those are doing the same things based off of the same kind of processes. But yeah, I mean, I don't know how it's going to imitate memory and different personas.
No. I think we just got to keep reading on the subject. Hopefully, LLM vendors will continue to publish information and content on how their models work. This. Like the model itself, in fact, quite a few of them have said, we don't really know how this is working, which is kind of fascinating and terrifying to hear. But ultimately, they've got a transformer in there, which is, taking in an input and producing an output. But what's happening now is increasingly those tools, those platforms are doing some sort of fan out web search, right? Where they're taking your query, turning that somehow into a set of searches, choosing results, not necessarily the top results. That's the question mark in this whole system. If they were just choosing the top 3 results, this would be easy. We'd all know exactly what to do. But because there appears to be, as SEMrush found, low correlation between top search results and AI citations, how are they selecting that content? What signals are they using to choose what to return? This is all stuff we don't know yet, or we don't understand well yet. And if we do understand it, everything becomes a lot clearer.
Yeah. It's really exciting. This is such, we've gone down a rabbit hole here, but I think it is good. Yeah. It is really exciting. Like everyone here is really excited. Like we are in the weeds of figuring this stuff out. Absolutely. Figuring out, which places do we need to have our brand mentioned on most?
Yeah.
Like is Wikipedia pages necessary for every single business now? Potentially. Like how do we get cited in Reddit, in Quora? Like these places, these third-party websites that are being referenced so often.
Yeah, exactly. Quite trusted, by the LLMs and by their users. How do you get your name in there?
Yeah.
It's kind of like digital PR to an extent as well. So we maybe need to think about, whether we start to factor in strategies like that on top of, owned content creation or not. Yeah, it is really interesting. And I mean, ultimately, all these other channels that we've mentioned, they're pretty well understood, right? When it comes to measuring LinkedIn, measuring YouTube, and there's some nuance there that some people might need to hear, but, you've got your engagement, you've got your impressions, you've got your clicks, you've got your follow-through conversions, you've got your dwell time, you've got your, we know what the stats are there.
We do. One thing I would say on any ad platform, LinkedIn being the main culprit here, is because we work with a lot of businesses who are leaning on LinkedIn to be their main ad platform. And I think every single one that we've gone into to start with has no conversion tracking set up. There's no excuse for me to not have conversion tracking set up, to be investing in a channel and not understanding the impact that it's having on conversions on your website, which is the main place buyers convert. For me, there's just no excuse.
Right, that's good advice to everybody then, which is get that in place. It's kind of like the revenue challenge for marketers. Like you're doing it blind if you don't have that data available to you. Yeah, fascinating. Okay.
So in platform conversions, view through conversions for LinkedIn especially need to be measured, because many people will just be scrolling through the feed. They will see your ad and might have some sort of brand recall, aided recall to remember your brand and then go back to it later via search, via some other navigational method, you still want to be credited on LinkedIn.
Yes.
Like, to have influenced that in
Yes.
some way, to know that that channel is working, that buyers are seeing your ad and then converting at some point in time.
Absolutely. Few things happen instantaneously, right? Like, people don't click on an ad and buy in B2B. That's not how it works. And if you optimize around that, you're optimizing for the wrong viewer, the wrong outcome, the wrong KPIs. But you've got to be able to track back and see what impact you had with these platforms on your conversions and how that goes through to pipeline as well. Yeah, that's good advice for everybody.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to ask you, Phil, is should website traffic be on a marketing dashboard these days?
Well, I mean, I think from a marketing team level, there's no reason to remove it. Why make yourself blind to something which you've spent so long understanding and still contributes to some degree to your overall results? But is it the report that goes in the top left of the dashboard anymore? No, certainly not. The landscape's changing. The role of search in pipeline generation is changing. The importance of pipeline in the big picture of things, the importance of website traffic rather, in the big picture of things, is shifted. And so I'm still fond of search, right? I still think we've spent so long mastering it, and it will remain, and it will still drive visitors to our website, particularly commercially. So why not know how many visitors are coming to your website? What's your thoughts on the subject?
Yeah, I think just because something is decreasing, like it is for most businesses, organic traffic is going down ultimately, and I can only see it continuing to go down. Like, it will ultimately continue to go down. Just because it's going down doesn't mean you should remove it from the dashboard, because you need to see that it's going down. Like, that's your way of understanding, okay, our website traffic is going down. What do we do about it? Like, that's the purpose of a dashboard, to understand the movement of data and react to it.
You might no longer take action to try and push it up, right? You might not try and drive website traffic up, although you would probably benefit to think of website traffic in terms of commercial versus informational, and want commercial website traffic to go up. But of course, website traffic doesn't necessarily break down neatly like that. So on its own, it's not terribly useful in achieving that aim. But yeah, I mean, I think you only take something off a dashboard when it's completely not aligned to the goal you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, and it may be removed at some point as the correlation starts to, get wider and wider between website traffic and the rest of your metrics, like high intent website conversions.
Yes.
And most businesses are already seeing that. Website traffic is dropping off because of informational queries, but, informational traffic being swallowed up elsewhere. But high intent leads, pipeline, remains consistent. Like, the gap is growing between those because informational search, which didn't provide businesses with all of those opportunities, is going elsewhere. But the commercial queries still remain in some sense.
Yes, it was historically a leading indicator. If you grew website traffic, you typically grew your high intent conversions as well. No longer quite the same, but not completely detached. So I think for the time being, it stays.
Yeah. Then I've seen some weird things on marketing dashboards like that are reported to, really senior people in businesses, like domain authority score, website bounce rates,
number of SEO errors and stuff,
number of backlinks. All of this stuff, by the way, is gonna become less important, I think. Like, these large language models, and I know we get onto AI, it seems like, in almost every sentence now, but domain authority is a Google search thing. It's not a ChatGPT thing. It's not a Claude thing. Claude and ChatGPT don't care about domain. They're not measuring trust signals to your website and authority on
deciding whether to include you.
No, they might at some point.
Well, it's interesting,
but it's going to look different.
Yeah, absolutely. For something to appear on your dashboard, even at the team level, you've really got to be able to draw a link between it and the business KPIs that you're trying to improve, which is if I spend a significant amount of effort improving this metric, like, am I going to see the results I want to achieve? Ultimately, over the years, you tend to develop a sense for this, which is like bounce rate is not something that if you improve it, you'll see, see a business impact, et cetera, et cetera. So most of those things don't belong on a dashboard. Again, they're important data points. They're useful
that's
data
the skin
points.
of the onion.
Good.
It's not even a layer. It's the skin.
Yeah,
it's
I
the
like
crusty bit.
I love that, actually. I think that's very well put, which is to say you definitely need it in your arsenal, but it's not dashboard material.
You want to refer to it if you need to.
Yeah, something else that I've seen quite frequently that is, these funnel-based reports, these like conversion rate-based reports, and they're quite pleasant to look at. So I think people get quite excited about putting them in place. But I've seen quite often that they, on their own, they lack insight. They don't give you a lot to go on. My general preference when it comes to reporting at all levels is show a time series so that you can see direction of travel. These funnel reports only show you a snapshot. Whenever I've used a funnel report myself, I've always put a previous period right alongside it so that I've at least got some comparability.
Yeah.
But stats, snapshots, moments in time, they don't mean a lot. So I think all of these metrics are best reported, over time so that you can see the direction of travel. Are we going in the right direction? The days when we could exactly attribute, the value of every pound to every outcome in a performance marketing world, they're over, right? So It's got to be direction of travel that you optimize for. Are our investments driving, increasingly better outcomes or worse outcomes, and what do we do to address that?
It's all correlation. Ultimately, what are we investing in and when, and are we seeing a result in this time period?
Yeah, absolutely.
And direction of travel, ultimately. Brand is an interesting one because, I'm a podcast addict, and all I keep hearing in every marketing podcast that I listen to is the importance of building brand now. I think, we've said a few times on this podcast that actually this notion of brand marketing is actually just good marketing that isn't performance marketing.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it's just creating demand. It always has been, but people like to dress things up, and I get it to kind of differentiate it as a thing. I see the value in doing that, to be fair.
Yes.
I think there are some ways to measure brand marketing, and they can be useful on marketing dashboards. Understanding things in Search Console, like how many people are actually searching for your brand name, for example. Share of voice is a useful thing to understand. Branded traffic from SEO, so how many people are actually clicking through on your brand name. These are all important things to understand. But I do think in the kind of brand marketing era right now, just investing and understanding the correlation with those leading indicators is more important than these super specific metrics.
Yes, which are again, subject to the correlation challenge, which is they don't necessarily 100% line up and tell you what the future's going to be.
Yeah.
So there's not a lot of point in, spending heaps of time and money to try and establish hyper granular data in that area. Now, if you're a ginormous FMCG giant, it's a different story. But if you're an SME or a scale up trying to drive pipeline, then these directional sort of sentiment indicators are good enough for you. And like you said, I think whenever anyone, myself included, hears the term brand marketing, I think about big, lavish brand exercises, and that's a form of brand marketing, but it's not the only form. Most marketing can be brand marketing, probably should be brand marketing, when the outcome you're optimizing for is a better place in the buyer's mind, resulting in pipeline, down the road. That brand marketing I think inspires an image of big, expensive costs, but it can be small, and you can do brand marketing every day in every way if you optimize for those outcomes.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, cool. Anything else before we kind of wrap things up here? Should we just recap the layers that we've got?
Go on.
So at the core of our onion, we've got the commercial metrics, executive level metrics directly tied to business outcomes.
Yeah.
Then we peel back a layer. We've got the leading indicators for that, the revenue drivers. So these metrics forecast the future commercial outcomes in layer one. Then we've got layer 3, the channel level metrics, the tactical performance indicators of specific platforms and channels that buyers use. Then you've maybe got a bit of skin left on the onion, where
other metrics.
you might just have some metrics in the arsenal, like domain authority, like bounce rate, like some of these brand metrics, perhaps in terms of branded search impressions, branded search clicks, those kind of things that could be useful to pull in when you're diving deep into particular channels.
Yep. And not a mention of revenue attribution in there at all.
Not a mention of revenue attribution,
which is a good thing.
Absolutely.
Given how misleading it is.
Yeah. Maybe we need to do an episode on that, actually. I think that probably just about cuts it. I think the big takeaway here is when to present that information and in what formats.
Yeah, like know your audience and realise that they have different requirements and needs. And like change the record, right? If you're one of those marketers that's been frustrated by the lack of support, the lack of trust, the lack of buy-in, first question to ask yourself is, well, is what I'm reporting consistent with getting that back from the audience? This is the solution to that.
Yeah, for sure. If you want more buy-in for marketing, be perceived as a serious function, not just a cost center, this is the approach to take.
Absolutely.
Basically.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Let's wrap it up there. We'll have to do a little mini episode, I think, next time, because people listening may have seen, some small logo at the bottom of our artwork for this podcast now, which is really exciting. We'll talk about that and how exciting that is and what that means probably next time.
All right.
So
sounds good.
let's leave it there. Let's wrap it up. Cool. Okay. Thank you everyone for listening. If you drop a like on YouTube, drop us a subscribe and a follow on any podcast network that you listen to this to. That'd be fantastic. And see you next time.
Thanks all.